Hi everyone, welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast. So, two lenders have both quoted 1% a month, but one is massively more expensive than the other. And what we tend to find is, as brokers, it is our job to help you go from just choosing a headline rate to actually choosing the cheapest lender. So, I want to talk around some of the reasons why headline rates are just complete lies. And how you can actually get into the granular detail and really understand the true cost of finance, because there's nothing more important when it comes to bridging finance, development finance, than understanding the true cost of finance. So there are a few things that matter straight off the bat. So you've got your fees, your minimum interest, you've even got extension terms. Not many people think about that because as human beings, we're kind of hardwired to always think about the positives. We're never thinking about the negatives. And I think that drives a lot of people to kind of forget that actually you can go into default, you can go into extensions, and actually the terms around those. And they're always detailed out as soon as we start looking at finance. They're all there in black and white, but they don't ever come to mind until you need them. So there's a few bits that really, really affect kind of that headline rate. And both those lenders, they might both be at 1%, but one is always going to be more expensive than the other. So there's a few things to look out for. Got a little list here that we'll go through. So the first thing is the arrangement fee. So many lenders will charge 2%. That's kind of the industry standard. So the arrangement fee doesn't tend to really come into anything because everyone tends to be kind of that straightforward 2%. The arrangement fee is always on the gross loan as well, unless specifically stated that it's on the net loan. But again, that could be something to keep an eye out on, is that if one lender charges 2% on the gross loan, that could be significantly more than 2% on the net loan. There's also the exit fee, that sneaky little cost that comes in. And normally as an industry standard, it's kind of 1% of the gross loan. Again, it could be 1% of the net loan. Again, worth checking that because there could be a cost difference there. Minimum interest. So this is something that very, very rarely gets picked up on. And as brokers, we will always bring it to your attention, but there are some brokers, unfortunately, that don't. Minimum interest period is the minimum amount of interest that a lender is going to charge you no matter when you redeem the loan. Many lenders are 3 months. And what this means is that if you're doing a really quick purchase, refurb, refinance, and let's say by some miracle you get out in 2 months, because you've got a minimum interest period of 3 months, you're still paying 3 months interest. So it's worth checking that, because if you want to be in and out of a bridge instantaneously, and we actually do have some scenarios where people only take a bridge for a day. If you want to be out within a day or a couple of months, you need to check that minimum interest period. There are not many lenders that don't have it, so it's always going to be there. The other thing is the default interest. This is kind of your punishment zone. So this is if you, for whatever reason, go past that date and for whatever reason you haven't extended, because again, that's another thing, is that a good broker is there to help you kind of extend rather than going to default. So you always need to be aware of that as well. But if you go into default interest, you could have default fees. So for example, they might charge 3.5%, maybe even 5% as a default fee. So that's a fee literally the second you go over. And then you're onto default interest as well. The worst one I've ever seen is a 5% default fee. We didn't put this in place. I need to caveat that straight away, is that we did not broker this. I saw this from a client who came to us in a panic, but they'd been charged a 5% default fee and then had gone into default interest of 3% a month, which is just insanity. I mean, it's crazy, crazy numbers that instantaneously just blow a deal completely out of the water. Extension fees, obviously you need to be aware of how much it's going to cost you to extend a loan, because very rarely do people exit on time for various different reasons. You need to be aware of what the legals are going to cost, valuations, monitoring costs. I mean, a lot of those are external costs, so it's very rare that the lender actually has control of those, but it's worth sort of keeping an eye on those. And then the last one that you want to compare is the interest charged on retained or rolled? And what that means is retained means that they essentially take the gross loan, charge the interest on that, and then deduct it off, which obviously is based on 1% a month would be more expensive than 1% a month based on rolled. So rolled, what they do is they work out how much you've drawn and then they charge 1% a month on the actual net loan that you've got. So they're charging 1% on a smaller balance as opposed to the 1% on the gross balance. So in the retained scenario, you're actually kind of paying interest on interest because they come up with this gross figure, charge interest on it, and then take it off, which means that you've paid interest on the gross figure even though they've taken the interest off. Very bizarre way of doing it, but there we go. A lot of lenders do it that way. So it's always worth comparing whether it's retained or rolled because it can make significant savings, and we've done an episode about that previously as well. So what you want to look at is get all of those fees together, all of those different scenarios together, and then you're comparing, right, okay, in the best case scenario, if the deal completes on time, no issues whatsoever, we get in and out, no extensions, no defaults, anything else, which one's the cheapest? You're then looking at the expected. So that's realistically, you expect a small delay. So if you've got a 1 month delay, which one's the cheapest? And then your worst case scenario is if you've got exits, extensions, everything else, what's the cost then? And realistically, I would say when you're comparing, you probably want to fall into either the expected or the worst case. And you want the lender that's going to be the cheapest in the worst case scenario, because although there's a lender that might be the cheapest in the best case scenario, they're probably going to be significantly more expensive when it comes to the worst case scenario. And then once you've done all that, once you've compared all the costs, everything else, you're then looking at, well, actually, do I want the cheaper lender or do I want the better lender? Because sometimes they're not the same. So you may find that actually the cheaper lender is way more aggressive, and the second you go over, you're not actually given the option of extensions and actually go into default and straight into repossession and everything else, and it gets quite horrific pretty quickly. The more expensive lender actually might give you 3 months grace period, everything else. Like there's some nice little bits that lenders can do. So it's that comparison of actually what do you want? Do you want the cheapest lender? Do you want the best lender? And doing all those comparisons. So very much a thing of headline rate is never the full story. 2 lenders quoting 1% a month. One of them is inevitably going to be significantly worse for you. So yeah, always worth doing that really in-depth comparison. And we'll always do that with clients. We'll always sit and give them a spreadsheet which breaks everything down. And then we'll undoubtedly have a phone call with the client to kind of go through and go, well, actually, lender A looks good on paper, but actually they've just recently done this to a client. Lender B looks good on paper, but actually they've just done this to a client. Lender C looks expensive, but actually they've just really helped out a client on this. So actually we'd probably have a look at that one. And we'll try and kind of guide where we can with that experience as well. But hopefully that was helpful. I know it's something that's come up a lot with clients recently who've had a few bad experiences, who we've kind of managed to help out. So it's something that really is coming up more and more regularly. And yeah, don't get sucked into the headline rate and always do a comparison. And if you've enjoyed this episode, like, share, chuck it out everywhere. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next one.